Imagine you could fast forward to age 70 and see two versions of your life, sitting side by side. In the first version, you wake up on a Tuesday morning with nowhere you have to be. You make coffee slowly. You read. You call your daughter and tell her you've booked flights to visit her family next month, not because you saved up for it, but because the money is simply there, the way it always is now. You sleep well, you don't calculate, you don't worry, you just live. In the second version, you wake up on that same Tuesday morning and the first thought in your head is a number. It's always a number. The property tax bill that arrived last week, the cost of the prescription that went up again, the checking account balance you checked before going to sleep last night and checked again the moment you opened your eyes. You worked for 40 years, you earned a respectable income, and somehow, impossibly, it still came to this. Here is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. Both of those people, the one who was free and the one who was afraid, made almost identical financial decisions for most of their lives. Same general income range, same general awareness of what they should be doing, the same vague intention to get serious about saving when things settled down a little. The entire difference between those two lives was created in a single decade. Not the first decade of their careers, when they were young and earning little. Not the final decade before retirement, when the urgency finally became impossible to ignore. The middle decade, the one that tends to feel the most stable, the most established, and therefore the least urgent. Their 40s. Here is the assumption most people carry into their 40s without ever examining it. The 40s feel like a rival. 2 decades of work are behind you. The career has shape. The income is real. The house is established. The family is raised. And for the first time in adult life, things feel genuinely manageable. The financial pressure of the 20s and 30s, the scramble, the tightness, the constant feeling of not quite having enough, has eased. There is finally some breathing room. And that feeling of breathing room is precisely what makes the 40s so financially dangerous. Because breathing room has 2 possible destinations. It can flow toward the future, into investments, into retirement accounts, into assets that compound quietly over the next 2 decades and eventually produce the kind of financial freedom that makes the Tuesday morning coffee feel effortless. Or it can flow into the present, into a larger house, into better cars, into the lifestyle that finally matches the income and the status and the sense that you've earned the right to enjoy what you've built. Most people, without ever consciously choosing, let it flow into the present. Not recklessly, not carelessly, just gradually, reasonably, one justifiable upgrade at a time. And by the time the 40s are over and the 50s bring retirement into focus, the breathing room is gone. The lifestyle has expanded to consume it entirely, and the decade that could have built everything has passed without building nearly enough. To understand why this particular decade carries so much weight, you need to understand 3 forces that come into alignment during your 40s and never align quite the same way again. The first force is income. For most professionals, earning power peaks somewhere in the mid-40s to early 50s. The steep climb of the early career has reached its high point. The raises may slow, but the absolute dollar amount sitting in a paycheck every month is higher than it has ever been, and likely higher than it will ever be again. This means the 40s are the years when you have the most raw material available for building wealth. More actual dollars to direct toward the future than at any previous point in your working life. The second force is time. At 40, you still have roughly 25 years before a traditional retirement age. That is a meaningful amount of time for money to compound. A dollar invested at 40, growing at historical market averages, becomes approximately $4 by 65. Wait 10 years and invest that same dollar at 50, and it becomes roughly $2.50. The mathematical multiplier attached to each invested dollar drops significantly with each year that passes. Your 40s represent the last window in which compounding has enough runway to do something truly significant. The money you put to work at 42 works dramatically harder than the money you put to work at 52. Not slightly harder, dramatically.
The third force is expense stabilization. The financial chaos of the 30s, young children, career building, house payments that stretched the budget to its limit, every expense category growing simultaneously, begins to settle. Kids become more self-sufficient. The house that once felt like a financial stretch now fits comfortably within the income. The foundational purchases of adult life have largely been made. This stabilization creates potential margin that genuinely did not exist before. These three forces, peak income, meaningful compounding runway, and stabilizing expenses, create a window of financial leverage that is unique to this decade. Someone who recognizes this window and deliberately captures it builds wealth that cannot be replicated by working harder later. Someone who lets the window pass while upgrading their lifestyle to match their new stability faces mathematical constraints in their 50s and 60s that simply cannot be overcome, no matter how aggressively they try to catch up. Let's put actual numbers to this so it stops being abstract. Picture someone who reaches 40 with $80,000 saved for retirement. They earn $100,000 annually and could realistically direct 15% of that, $15,000 per year, into long-term investments. If they do exactly that from 40 to 65, investing consistently in a broadly diversified portfolio, earning average historical returns, they arrive at retirement with somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million. Combined with Social Security income, this person has genuine financial freedom. Options, the Tuesday morning coffee. Now picture the same person making a different set of choices in their 40s. Not dramatically different choices, just the ones that feel reasonable in the moment. A housing upgrade here, a nicer vehicle there, the retirement contribution temporarily reduced to cover increased expenses. Their 40s savings rate averages around 4% instead of 15%. At 50, they recognize the shortfall and commit to aggressive catch-up contributions, 20% of income for the next 15 years. Despite this genuine effort, despite the sacrifice of the 50s, they retire with somewhere around $650,000. That is the retirement that requires calculation every morning. That is the version that worries. The difference between those two retirement accounts, between freedom and anxiety, was not created by dramatically different incomes or dramatically different choices. It was created by 1 decade of savings rate. 11 percentage points of income invested during the years when compounding had the most time to work. That gap cannot be closed later. The mathematics of time simply does not allow it. Within the 40s, a handful of specific decision categories carry the most weight. Understanding them clearly is what separates the people who arrive at retirement with options from the people who arrive wondering what happened. The housing decision is the largest single variable for most families. The 40s typically bring real pressure to upgrade living space. The children need more room. The career success deserves a home that reflects it. The mortgage payment on a larger house feels manageable given the current income. What most people do not calculate is what that upgraded monthly payment actually costs in retirement wealth. An additional $1,800 a month in housing costs, redirected away from investments for 25 years, does not cost $1,800 a month. It costs somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million in retirement assets, depending on market returns. The house upgrade is not a housing decision. It is a retirement decision wearing a housing costume.
Families who stay in appropriately sized homes and invest the difference do not just save money, they purchase a fundamentally different retirement. The vehicle decision compounds quietly over time. Upgrading from practical, reliable transportation to status-oriented vehicles seems like a modest lifestyle choice, but the premium in purchase price, insurance, maintenance, and the frequency with which expensive vehicles get replaced accumulates across a decade into a number that would genuinely shock most people if they calculated it honestly. The families who drive sensible, dependable cars throughout their 40s and invest the difference are not depriving themselves of anything essential. They are making a trade: modest transportation now, real freedom later. The children's education decision is perhaps the most emotionally complex one. The 40s are peak child-rearing years, and the pressure to fund every opportunity, every activity, every prestigious university that accepts your child is intense and deeply human. Parents who drain retirement accounts or take on significant debt to fund education are making a decision whose financial consequences they have often not fully examined. Children graduate into careers with decades of earning ahead of them. Parents who hollow out their retirement savings to fund those careers enter their 50s with a decade of recovery time and a gap that rarely closes completely. Supporting children and protecting retirement are not mutually exclusive, but they require honest, intentional choices about balance rather than defaulting to maximum spending in both directions simultaneously. The lifestyle inflation decision is the one that operates most invisibly. Colleagues renovate their kitchens, neighbors buy vacation properties, social circles drift toward more expensive restaurants, more elaborate travel, more visible displays of the success that everyone in the group has now earned. The 40s bring social pressure to consume in proportion to the income, and that pressure is subtle enough that most people never consciously recognize they are responding to it. The families who maintain a lifestyle that is slightly below what their income could support are not making themselves miserable. Research consistently shows that lifestyle upgrades produce a genuine happiness boost lasting roughly 18 months before the new normal sets in completely. The family that resists the upgrade does not experience lasting deprivation. The family that makes it does not experience lasting joy. They experience the same baseline, but one of them has invested the difference. There is a deeper psychological pattern running beneath every one of these decisions, and naming it is important. Your 40s arrive carrying a feeling that has been building for 20 years, a feeling that you have put in the work, absorbed the pressure, deferred enough, and finally arrived somewhere that justifies enjoying the fruits of all that effort. The impulse to expand the lifestyle at this point is not irrational. It is deeply human. You did work hard. You did earn something. The question is simply what form that earning takes, whether it arrives now in the shape of an upgraded present or later in the shape of an unchained future. The trap is that our brains are not wired to feel the cost of the future version viscerally. An upgraded kitchen is immediate and tangible. The compounding investment returns foregone because of that kitchen are invisible and abstract. We can calculate them intellectually, but we cannot feel them the way we feel the satisfaction of the renovation. This is the fundamental challenge of every long-term financial decision, and it is most acute during the 40s when the pressure to finally enjoy is strongest and the cost of doing so is highest. The people who navigate this successfully do not have superhuman willpower. They do not white-knuckle their way through a decade of self-denial. They simply understand the trade clearly enough that the future version becomes as real and as motivating as the present one. They can picture the Tuesday morning coffee with the same vividness that they can picture the renovated kitchen. And when those two images are equally real, the choice becomes far less difficult. If you are in your 20s or early 30s reading this, you have something valuable that cannot be purchased later: foreknowledge. You now understand that the decade of greatest financial consequence is still ahead of you, and the habits you establish now, automatic saving, deliberate lifestyle boundaries, a clear definition of enough, are the ones that will protect you when the pressure of the 40s arrives in full force. If you are entering your 40s right now, you are standing at the most important financial inflection point of your entire life. This is not a reason for panic. It is a reason for honest, immediate assessment. Look at your housing costs relative to your income and ask whether they leave real margin for investing. Look at your savings rate and ask whether it is genuinely proportional to what this decade requires. Look at every major expense category and ask whether it reflects a deliberate choice or a default that accumulated without examination. Every decision made clearly now is worth more than the same decision made at 50. If you are in your late 40s and recognize that the first half of the decade did not go the way this video describes, you still have meaningful time, but it requires a different level of honesty, not surface adjustments, real structural reconsideration. Downsizing housing while equity still has time to be redirected. Eliminating status-oriented expenses that deliver more appearance than actual satisfaction. Maximizing every tax-advantaged investment vehicle available. The gap can still be narrowed, but narrowing it requires choices that feel more uncomfortable than the ones available at 42. Go back to those two people at the beginning, the one with the coffee and the quiet morning, the one with the numbers running on a loop before sunrise. Neither of them made a single catastrophic decision. Neither of them experienced a disaster that explained everything. The distance between their lives was created by hundreds of small decisions spread across 10 years. Decisions that felt, at the time, like reasonable responses to reasonable circumstances. A housing upgrade that seemed affordable, a vehicle that seemed deserved, a retirement contribution that seemed temporarily reducible, a lifestyle that seemed proportionate to the income. Small decisions, enormous consequences, compounded across a decade and then compounded again across the 2 decades that followed it. Your 40s will arrive, or they are already here, or they have recently passed. In each case, the core truth is the same. This decade does not care about your intentions. It does not reward the plan you meant to execute. It only reflects the decisions you actually made, the savings rate you actually maintained, the lifestyle you actually chose, the investments you actually funded. The Tuesday morning coffee is not reserved for people with extraordinary incomes or extraordinary discipline. It belongs to people who understood during their 40s that the present and the future were competing for the same dollars, and who chose deliberately and consistently to give the future its fair share. That choice is still available. The only question is whether you make it while the compounding still has enough time to do what only compounding can do. If this reshaped how you think about time and money, share it with someone who needs to hear it before it is too late for them to use it. And if you want to keep going deeper into the financial decisions that actually determine how life turns out, stick around. That's exactly what this channel is built for.